Welcome to another edition of your favorite parliamentary news magazine program, The Chamber. My name is Duke Bentopoko. It's a pleasure to be with you here once again to serve you the very best of what has transpired in Parliament this week and a review. We'll take a break here. When I come back, we'll delve into the major issues up for discussion on the program. You're welcome back from the break. So we'll begin our offering every week by curating for you and bringing to you the major stories that have made headlines in the course of the parliamentary week. All this is put together and served you on the recap segment. So here's the recap for the week. Last week, the National Cathedral Secretariat issued a statement to explain the state's involvement in the project. Architect St. David Ajayi's firm, Ajayi & Associates, has been involved with the project since inception. The MP for Ashaiman and Exnogbe has, however, taken issue with the awarding of a consultancy contract for the project to the firm Ajayi & Associates. He is heading to court over alleged procurement breaches.
The Office of the President, which is the entity in this matter, asked for single source procurement under 72(5)(a), which is to say that David Ajayi is the sole consultant in the whole world. For that matter, the contract must be awarded to him. And the Public Procurement Authority have now gone beyond 72(5)(a) to award the contract rather under 72(5)(b), which means that it is under emergency. And so you see the lacuna there. And so I'm heading to court for the court to set aside this single source, procurement under consultancy, and also David Ajayi, whichever money that was paid to him, he has to refund that money back because it is not within the laws of Ghana.
On the floor of the House, the Minister for Transport's failure to appear to answer questions became a matter of contention.
Ministers are gradually turning this House, the Speaker, for lack of better word, like a joke. Because, Mr. Speaker, they wait until the morning of asking the questions. Then now they will run to you that I cannot come because there's one agent thing or the other. No, Mr. Speaker, as you are very much aware, these questions are transmitted to the ministries long before even the business meeting happens on Thursday. Mr. Speaker, for the Minister for Transport in particular, yes, he used to be one of those who would happily come to the House and answer questions. But, Mr. Speaker, of late, time and time again, so I can recollect that this will be about the third time I alone is raising concern about his inability to appear before the House.
I think it's high time we name and shame. It's high time we name and shame. So it shouldn't box all the ministers together. We have ministers who have been doing their work diligently, and they take this House serious. I don't want to mention any names. Anytime a number of them are unable to attend upon the House, they've given notice ahead of time. And for me, that is the trust of your worry. The notice should come ahead of time. We understand that their man is a human institution, their money. But you cannot bring your correspondence or excuse duty on the same day that you're supposed to appear before this House. That is totally unacceptable.
The Speaker, Alban Bagbin, only fell short of referring the Minister to the Privileges Committee for contempt of Parliament.
To refer his conduct to the Privileges Committee. But because of the intervention of leadership, I will resist that temptation and not refer him to the Privileges Committee for today. But the next conduct tantamount to this behavior will be referred to the Privileges Committee. I will not accept his request that the questions be rescheduled for Thursday. I will refer the questions back to the Business Committee to reschedule it at the appropriate date for him to answer.
Parliament altered its scheduled program for the Minister of Finance to deliver a speech on COVID-19 expenditure first before answering questions. He finally took the podium to deliver a 15-page statement.
Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that the status of utilization of the funds to finance the COVID-19 measures excludes funds of the National COVID-19 Trust Fund and the Ghana Private Sector COVID-19 Fund. Mr. Speaker, for the year 2020 and 2021, the program expenditure amounted to 15.763 million for the COVID-19 related expenditure, out of which the actual utilization was 12.036 million. In 2020, a total amount of 11.162 million, this includes a cap, was programmed for COVID-19 related expenditure. Out of the total of 8.12 billion was utilized. The amount was utilized to provide support to households, supply equipment, and provide relief to health workers, health infrastructure, security operations, evacuations, quarantine and coordination, economic relief, stabilization and revitalization, and COVID-19 complementary releases.
The Speaker allowed members to comment on the statement. First was the ranking member on Finance Committee, Dr. Kiselato Forson, who had concerns for a difference in the sums accounted for.
If you've mobilized 19 billion and you've spent 12 billion, at least give us an indication. You receive IMF 1 billion. You are telling us that you raised a bond of 10 billion. You're also telling us that you had some sources from World Bank. You've given us the numbers, but you have spent 12 billion. Give us an idea where the rest of the money is. The bond that you received, the IMF money that you received, where is the rest of that money? So, Speaker, I think it's a legitimate question. It is a legitimate question, and that is my second point. So, Speaker, Mr. Speaker, so the difference here that I'm seeing is 7.3 billion Ghana cedis unaccounted for, and I want to find out where is that money.
The Minority Leader Harry Naidusu called for a bipartisan committee to further probe the issue.
When you come to expenditure on COVID-19, status update on COVID-19 expenditure, page 6, he accounts for 12 billion. Then the president accounts for 17.7 billion. So the House of people will say, couldn't Ayabachi? Couldn't to which, where is the missing money? 17.7 billion against 12 billion, against 19 billion, against 12 billion. Where is the money?
The Majority Leader rather called for the referral of the matter to the already established committees of the House.
These expenditures fall under the various subject matter committees. In particular, health, finance. Expenditures were incurred by Parliament. COVID expenditures were incurred by the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, and Finance. Mr. Speaker, so liberated to work and do better work. And when they have finished, they will submit their report. So they are covered. The subject matter committees that have the responsibility of tracing and tracking these expenditures. And if there are subject matter committees that can have responsibility, why can't we set up an ad hoc committee? Mr. Speaker, as far as I'm concerned, it has no basis.
The Speaker, having listened to the debate, referred the matter to a joint committee on finance and health.
By those who believe that we have already existing committees that can carry out this function. I believe from the comments that there are still a lot of gaps that we need to throw light on. When you read Article 175, it says, the public funds of Ghana shall be the consolidated fund, the contingency fund, and such other public funds as may be established by or under the authority of an act of Parliament. Now, the fund in question falls under the ambit of Article 175. and therefore qualifies to be referred to as public funds. Was it paid into the consolidated fund, or it was being utilized by the trust? In that case, if it was not paid into a consolidated fund, it will not be possible for the Ministry of Finance to account for that, which meant that the trust will have to account for the utilization of that fund. This means that there's still the need for further investigation and inquiry in this matter.
The Speaker of Parliament paid a surprise visit first to the National Buffer Stock Company. He interacted with staff and management before proceeding to the National School Feeding Program. Here, the Speaker backed calls by the school feeding caterers for the unit price of feeding to be increased.
Definitely, the caterers, as we said, they do the pre-finance. And because of the global economic situation, which has definitely affected Ghana, there is a need for an upward adjustment of the amount that you give to them. Definitely 97 pesos is on the low side. Their demand is justified. But as to whether government can reach up to the 3 cedis a day is another issue we all have to discuss. It's with this that I want to call on other stakeholders, including the private sector and charitable organizations, to come on board.
The national coordinator of the program, Gertrude Kwashiga, lamented the challenges facing the organization.
I think that for some time now there has been a lot of noise in the media about delay in payment. Caterers, they form themselves into associations, and those associations have not been recognized by us. And so for that kind of action, we have written to them, and then they come here. We talk to them mostly in this conference room. They go back and they do the opposite. And so it's becoming a lot of problems. So many agitations with lies, I would say. We don't handle caterers' money here. The only money that comes to us is for our goods and services, which we use for operational activities. Because, of course, caterers have to be trained. MAE has to go to the field to go and monitor. So they need money to do all that. We have to pay our electricity. We have to pay our internet facilities. We have to pay for water. Right now, we don't even have water to offer you. And so those things that we also have to run the office, buy A4 sheets, buy toners, and then a whole lot.
The leaders of the House also went on a visit to the Jata cement plant in Tema. After a tour of the facilities, Group CEO of the firm, Ibrahim Mahama, bemoaned the rising cost of power on their operations.
You need a lot of power to be able to burn it into kiln, into the clinker. Now, if you look at the power prices today, it really doesn't. Is not attractive to do that. But when Ghana gets into the excess power producing, that's what we would be looking to do to be able to start the backward integration.
The majority and minority leaders suggested various ways to boost the operations of indigenous firms like Jata Cement.
A lot of financial capital. It takes money from the banks. If interest rates are high, they will not help him. It's the reason why we should all help to bring some stability in the financial circles. Again, production so much depends on power that is generated and sold to them. If the cost of power is high, it certainly would affect the cost of the cement.
Only in Ghana that industry pays more than ordinary consumers when it comes to electricity. It's been a matter that the Association of Ghana Industries have put on the table since my days as Minister for Trade. We would need institutional reforms in order to be able to correct it, to guarantee lower costs for them.
This week, we take you to the floor of Parliament, where obviously the big item, the biggest ticket item, or the big ticket item this week was the accounting of the use of COVID funds by government, by the Minister for Finance. So we'll take you there, we'll bring you the statement from the Minister, choice parts of it, and then the arguments and the contributions that ensued. after the statement was presented by the Minister of Finance. So that's from the floor segment for you this week.
Mr. Speaker, you may recall that on 30th March 2020, I made a statement to Parliament on the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy of Ghana, following which the implementation of the coronavirus alleviation program commenced. Furthermore, during the presentation of the 2020 mid-year fiscal policy, I indicated that the supplementary request included a program funding of 19.3 billion from various funding sources to support the budget both directly and indirectly. On the expenditure side, an amount of 11.16 billion was programmed for COVID-19 related expenses, detailed attached as Appendix 1. The difference of 8.14 billion was programmed to provide for shortfalls in revenue. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, the budget programmed the total amount of 4.6 billion for expenses, detailed attached as Appendix 2. It is worth noting that the Ministry of Finance mobilized financial resources while the various COVID-19 interventions and related expenses were implemented by the relevant sector ministries and agencies. Mr. Speaker, to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on businesses and households, ensure that economic activities recover and minimize job losses, government mobilized 18.19 billion out of the program 19.3 billion in 2020 from various funding sources as shown in Table 1 to support the budget. GOG contingency fund of 1.2 billion, World Bank group funds of 1.3 billion, IMF 1 billion program, AFDB 405 million, EU 504 million, BOG bonds 10 billion, summing up to 19.3 billion. Mr. Speaker, government program funding of 1,203,715,085 cedis to finance the coronavirus alleviation program. This program focused on achieving 5 key objectives: limit and stop the importation of the virus, contain its spread, provide adequate care for the sick, limit the impact of the virus on social and economic life, and inspire the expansion of our domestic capability and deepen our self-reliance. The Ministry of Health also led the preparation and implementation of the Emergency Preparedness and Response Plan, which was financed by the Bank. An amount of $230 million was secured from various facilities under the World Bank to support the implementation of COVID-19 Emergency Preparedness and Response Plan. The funding facilities included the Fast Track COVID-19 Facility, $35 million. This financing is Ghana's share of the World Bank's $4 billion Fast Track COVID-19 Facility that was announced in March 2020 to enable countries deal with the pandemic. GAID SEC $65 million. This amount was drawn from the existing World Bank-funded Greater Accra Resilient and Integrated Development Project by activating the contingency response component of the project. An additional financing of $130 million in November 2020 to strengthen and scale up the gains of the EPRP. Mr. Speaker, an additional financing of $200 million was also secured in 2021, largely for the deployment of COVID-19 vaccines to support other sources of financing of the vaccination program under this plan. The plan sought to achieve the following: strengthen coordination of the overall preparedness activities. Strengthen capacity of regions, priority health facilities and points of entry to prevent, rapidly detect, investigate, and control any COVID-19 outbreak in Ghana. Strengthen national capacity for laboratory surveillance and diagnostics. Build capacity for early diagnosis, case management, contact tracing, and infection prevention and control. Ensure minimum health logistics are in place in prioritized regions, health facilities, and points of entry for preparedness and laboratory capacity sustained for timely and quality testing of COVID-19 samples, and VI increased public awareness on COVID-19, risk mitigation and response measures. Budget support. Mr. Speaker, in addition to all the above sources of funds, other funds were sourced to support the budget. These include the US $1 billion from the International Monetary Fund, 10 billion Ghana cedis from the Bank of Ghana, $69.3 million from the Africa Development Bank, and $99.7 million from the European Union. By the grace of the Almighty God, through our well-designed plans and the internal and external funds we mobilize, government provided support to the frontline health workers, protected livelihoods and job losses, demonstrated care to the vulnerable in society, and supported small businesses. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that the status of utilization of the funds to finance the COVID-19 measures excludes funds of the National COVID-19 Trust Fund and the Ghana Private Sector COVID-19 Fund.
Granted that he's received 19.3 billion. But what I see here is that he has said that so far, from 2020 to December 2021, he has spent 12 billion of that money, 12 billion. What he has failed to do is to tell us that between the 19.3 billion and the 12 billion, the difference of 7.3 billion, where the money is and what they have used the money for. So, Speaker, you have mobilized 19.3 billion from your own document. So, Speaker, I make reference to the document. First, I'm making reference to page 4, table 1. Page 4, table 1. I receive it at the same time as you receive it. Page 4, table 1. Table 1 says that you have mobilized 19.3 billion sources of funding. Funding sources, 19.3 billion. That is what is there. So, Speaker, if you go further to the same document, page 6, item A, expenditure on COVID-19. It gives us status of utilization of 2020 and 2021 COVID-19. So, Speaker, the last item, it gives you the amount they budgeted, the amount they have released so far. And he said that so far, they have released 12 billion. So my argument is that if you've mobilized 19 billion and you've spent 12 billion, at least give us an indication. You received IMF 1 billion. You are telling us that you raised a bond of 10 billion. You're also telling us that you had some sources from World Bank. You've given us the numbers. But you have spent 12 billion. Give us an idea where the rest of the money is. The bond that you received, the IMF money that you received, where is the rest of that money? So, Speaker, I think it's a legitimate question. It is a legitimate question, and that is my second point. So, Speaker, Mr. Speaker, so the difference here that I am seeing is 7.3 billion Ghana cedis unaccounted for, and I want to find out where is that money. It's legitimate. So, Speaker, my third point relates to the fact that our minister responsible for finance has given us an indication that he spent 12 billion Ghana cedis so far, 2020 and 2021. The Speaker, my concern has to do with the fact that, yes, he has given us some headline items. He said to us, and it is also in the media review of the year 2021, Government of Ghana's media review. And if you refer to page 101, appendix 4.3 of the media, 4E of the media review, the same thing has been stated here. Mr. Speaker, the minister had said, and let me commend him for the consistency in reporting. Mr. Speaker, page 101 of the media review. It's also in the same statement, appendix 1 of the media of the document that he's given to us. He said, Mr. Speaker, that they have spent 598 million at the time, from January to June 2021, 598 million, equivalent to $1 billion for the purposes of, $100 million for the purposes of payment for nose masks, hand sanitizers, and Veronica buckets.
Let me refer you to paragraph 15 of the statement made by the Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that the status of utilization of the funds to finance the COVID-19 measures excludes funds of the National and the Ghana Private Sector COVID-19 Fund. Mr. Speaker, it must be put on record that my colleague never read the statement and did not advert his mind today. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our colleagues have been on the rampage. Our colleagues have been on the rampage trying to foul the atmosphere in this country with regards to the expenditures that the minister has ably presented to the House. Mr. Speaker, a summary of the expenditures are captured on page 4 of the statement. Mr. Speaker, in March 2020, when the COVID-19 outbreak occurred, we all were very scared and did not have any clue about this pandemic. It took a responsible government to devise a very deliberate plan to protect us. Mr. Speaker, all the 275 members in this chamber are alive. We all benefited one way or the other from the reliefs that have been presented to this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the extent that our spouses were even privileged to come to the hospital or the clinic to get their jabs. Where were we going to get the monies from, Mr. Speaker? How many of us didn't benefit from the free water supply as captured in this report? How many of us didn't benefit from the free electricity? The lifeline consumers, the Minister of Energy is here. Our constituents, how many of you didn't benefit? Mr. Speaker, we are here for accountability. That is why the Minister on pages 14 and 15 has given us an elaborate expenditure plan, which cannot be criticized by your good self. You haven't been able to punch any meaningful hole in the expenditure as provided for by the Minister. We expected much from the minority. You've disappointed the people of this country. You've told them a lot that the government has concealed a lot of expenditures under this COVID-19 relief. To hear your ranking member or our ranking member on finance speak, rather commending a Minister of Finance, I doff my heart for the Minister of Finance for being honest and consistent, as stated by Honourable Atukos. Mr. Speaker, Agenda 111. The Minister said, and rightly so, that he set aside 600 million for this elaborate program. COVID-19 exposed Ghana's health system to the extent that most districts in this country did not have health facilities. What did a thinking government do? A thinking government decided that, look, let me take advantage of this pandemic and spread health infrastructure across the country. How do I start it? I have to make provision for in the budget. Fortunately for us, our colleagues and ourselves approved the budget and included that money. 700 million cedis was also added, making it 1.3 billion. Projects are ongoing across the districts. We as a country must look for additional funds to ensure that our brothers in Bunkrugu, Okankwe Central, and across the country have access to quality health care.
This statement is the very reason why a bipartisan committee must be constituted to probe the entire expenditure on COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, I will point to few inaccuracies in the statement presented by the Minister responsible for Finance. Mr. Speaker, that must not be entertained on this floor. Mr. Speaker, may I refer you to page 7, paragraph 19. Mr. Speaker, with your permission. Mr. Speaker, at this juncture, I wish to dispel the notion that there have been inconsistencies in government data on COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency the President intimated during the State of the Nation address on 30th March 2022 that we had mobilized, Mr. Speaker, the emphasis is mine, about 17.7 billion since 2020. Mr. Speaker, that is not what the President said. Mr. Speaker, may I refer you to the State of the Nation address, and that is on page 5. Page 5. Mr. Speaker, the very first line. In all data from the Ministry of Finance tells us that an amount of 17.7 billion, which is 4.6% of the GDP, has been spent, not mobilized. Mr. Speaker, there's a clear difference between what has been mobilized and what has been spent. Why do you do this to Parliament? Mr. Speaker, this between him and the President, who is telling us the truth. Mr. Speaker, again, Mr. Speaker, if you check, Mr. Speaker, if you check the statement that has been given to us, especially table, Mr. Speaker, especially Appendix 1, status of utilization of 2022 COVID-19 budget. Mr. Speaker, this statement tells us, Mr. Speaker, that an amount of 600 million Ghana cedis was released with respect to Agenda 111. As of 2020, Mr. Speaker, as a matter of fact, Agenda 111 was actually commissioned, the sword was cut on the 17th of August 2021. Mr. Speaker, meanwhile, that money was released as far back as 2020, which is clearly captured here. What was that money used for? Mr. Speaker, these are all issues that we demand answers. And Mr. Speaker, knowing very well the rules of contributing or commenting on statements, we cannot use statements to resolve these issues. Mr. Speaker, again, let me refer you to paragraph 28 of the statement. Paragraph 28 says that they spent 4.3 Ghana cedis on each person, and they spent on about 2,744 people. Mr. Speaker, if you do the computation, you are arriving at around 11.9 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, there's a huge difference of about 240, almost 243,000 Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, the minister is telling us that, Mr. Speaker, that money was used for transportation within the metropolis. Mr. Speaker, I think that we need to know the details of this expenditure.
You remember we came to this house and revised the expenditure, revised the revenue numbers by close to 11.1 billion as a result of the effects of COVID. So the difference between the 11.1 and the 19.3 is what we use to shore up the budget. If you revise your revenue numbers down by 11.1 billion and you shore it up with a difference of 8.1 billion, clearly you've accounted for the 19.3 billion. And then I want to also go to page 5. I also want to go to page 7, paragraph 19. And it was quoted that the president said they had spent 8.1 billion on COVID-19 fund. When you come to page 6, clearly it is correct. You see it here that what we utilized, what we spent, what we utilized is actually 8.1 billion. So clearly, today the minister has put to rest the inconsistencies being said or by our minority brothers and sisters. And today it is very clear that we have been consistent. Yes, it was 19.3 billion that came in. We have been able to account for the 19.3 billion. 8.1 billion was used directly for COVID-19 expenditure, and the difference was used to shore up the revenue numbers that dropped. Again, when you go to 2021, we put in the budget an expenditure of 4.6 billion for direct COVID-19 expenditures. And clearly, we've been able to account for the 3.9 billion that we utilized. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't see the need why our colleagues on the other side are asking for a special audit in this. Clearly, the Auditor General at the end of the day will also look into this. This is what we have, and this is what I believe the Auditor General is also going to look at. One thing that I also want to point out that was out there was the specific inflows from the World Bank. Our colleagues on the other side also mentioned in various forums that this was not fully accounted for. Clearly, the $435 million that came from the World Bank has been accounted for on paragraph 11. When you look at it, it says that paragraph 11I, there was a fast-track amount of $35 million. And then when you go to paragraph 11II, it says there was another $65 million, which we have accounted for. And paragraph 11III, there's another $130 million that also came from the World Bank. And in paragraph 12, it says $200 million also came from the World Bank. This we have all accounted for. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy that today we are putting the matter to rest. All the monies that came in 2020, the 19.3 billion, we have accounted for it through the table that has been provided here, where we have 8.1 billion being utilized, and then the difference is what we use to shore up the revenue numbers. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 was a rare thing. We had never seen this before, but yet still, this government thought it wise and saw that the most important thing to do was to save lives and also to protect lives and save the economy. So two things this government did. First was to, in the midst of the pandemic, was to save lives and protect livelihoods. And that is what we did in 2021, and we accounted for it. And then the second was to see how we can revitalize the economy after the negative effects of COVID-19 pandemic. And that is why we also put in 4.6 billion, and then we have accounted for the 3.9 billion that we use. Mr. Speaker, with this, I believe that we have brought the matter to rest.
Mr. Speaker, one of my biggest difficulties is that this is a house of records. The minister appeared before this house and presented the 2021 budget statement and economic policy. In that document, the minister reported to us where he has received monies for COVID-19 and how much he has spent. Mr. Speaker, this is not my document. This is the Minister for Finance's own document, which is a record in this house.
Put the page and appendix now.
Mr. Speaker, if you go to page 4 of that statement of the budget, particularly under appendix 12B, summary of funding sources, Mr. Speaker, all the sources that the minister raised the money, he reported the total at 19.3, which he has rightly reported in this report, except that he provided utilization that he had already done in each of the areas that he has listed. He actually even indicated how much of those utilizations are as a matter of loans to finance the deficit, and how much of it is our own money that doesn't go into the deficit. Mr. Speaker, the minister concluded that all the monies we borrowed that was utilized and not sitting in any bank account ended up at about 16.4 billion. He reported in that same document that when he now adds our own money, which in this case is the money he drew down on our contingency vote or contingency fund, the total amount is 18.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, this doesn't look like 12 billion. In fact, that is 50% underreporting. From the minister's own document before this house, he is unable to speak to the same numbers a year after. That is very serious. Mr. Speaker, if I take the numbers the minister is reporting for 2021, that he spent 3.9, and I add it to the figure he gave me for 2020, Mr. Speaker, I get total expenditure on COVID of 22.1 billion, the minister's own report. Mr. Speaker, the minister is not reporting to us 10 billion Ghana cedis of our own money.
Why? Why?
In his own report. This is not my report. This is the budget statement of the Minister for Finance,
And then quoting scripture,
which is a public record in this house. And that, after almost a year, 6 billion has disappeared, 10 billion has disappeared, and it is now a Koshoko 12 billion. Mr. Speaker, we must be very serious with this house. And we must be serious with the international community that gave us our money.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, this is an affront to democracy. And I sit here and I can't even trust documents you give me because I don't know the lifespan of that document. If 2 years later, that document will not be the same.
How much more the Bible will?
How can I be relying on this type of data from the same source? Mr. Speaker, it is very, very serious.
Paragraph 33C. This is what the Minister for Finance has to say. The establishment of the Development Bank Ghana to address gaps in the Ghanaian credit market, especially the availability of medium and long-term finance for the private sector. Then, Mr. Speaker, my emphasis. A total of 853 million. Few days ago, the President was reported in the Ghanaian media on this particular matter. Mr. Speaker, same Minister of Finance statement. The amount of money he received from the European Union, which was meant for the purpose of establishing the Development Bank, Mr. Speaker, in the Minister's statement, page 4, I quote, is 504 million. So you have spent 800 million on the establishment of Development Bank, when you are also accounting for the EU only giving you 504 million. Yet the people of Ghana are aware that the Development Bank was established with seed money from the EU money of 853 million. We need the fine detail. Here you are providing for 504 million in your table 1, paragraph 9, whilst you are reporting 800 million, a discrepancy of almost 300 million Ghana cedis. And we want to know, even the Development Bank is now established that it's wholly established with statutory funds, even though we take note that this Parliament of Ghana is not given the opportunity to on a sad experience of over 20 years on cleansing to guide you in the establishment of new want reconciliation to it. Mr. Speaker, I'm also holding with me here on the state of the nation by His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, presented to this day 30th March 2022 at Parliament House. And Mr. Speaker, I refer you to page 4, and I quote His Excellency the President. Mr. Speaker, in all, data from the Ministry of Finance tells us that an amount of 17.7 billion or 4.6% of GDP has been spent in containing the pandemic since 2020. President of Ghana, 17.7 billion. Minister of Finance, 12 billion. Who should we believe? Who should we believe? The President or the Minister? 17 billion and 12 billion. Then, Mr. Speaker, who should we believe? Further, Mr. Speaker, the President also had this to say in the same page 4 of the State of the Nation address. It took an unbudgeted 1.9 billion to assure that our children and teaching staff went back to school. Mr. Speaker, President of Ghana, 1.9 billion. May I refer you to the Honorable Minister of Finance statement here, page 11, paragraph 36. The President says 1.9 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is reporting 1.119 billion. Another discrepancy in page 36, and I read, an amount of 1,119,73 million was allocated for mass school reopening in January 2021. Yet the President says in his State of the Nation 1.9 billion, and you are giving us 1.1 billion. Another unexplained discrepancy. So, Mr. Speaker, for us, a probe and an open public inquiry into COVID expenditure beyond the headline numbers of the Minister of Finance is inevitable and an imperative. We are not looking for headline figures. I spent 12 billion. 12 billion on what? On what? We need the expenditure returns and expenditure details of every amount.
Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, these expenditures fall under the various subject matter committees. In particular, health,
Finance.
expenditures were incurred by Parliament. COVID expenditures were incurred by the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Health, and Finance. Mr. Speaker, so liberated to work and do their work. And when they have finished, they will submit their report. So they are covered. The subject matter committees that have the responsibility of tracing and tracking these expenditures. And if there are subject matter committees that can have responsibility, why can't we set up an ad hoc committee? Mr. Speaker, as far as I'm concerned, it has no basis. It has no basis. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we should liberate the relevant committees to work and bring us a report. If we want to have, because there are so many matters that must be, Speaker, we with the committee that we charged, the defense committee, to go to the shooting. Mr. Speaker, we can't say to them, Parliament is adjourning, I guess, on the 26th or 27th of July. We can then say that these committees, the relevant committees, must trace and track their allocations with respect to COVID and report to us, maybe within 2 weeks, or maybe not exceeding 3 weeks. The Speaker will be doing justice to this House, rather than saying that we should set up an ad hoc committee. I don't see the justification in this at all. Having said so, Mr. Speaker, I believe we should express our gratitude to the Minister for responding to this House to give us the briefing that he has served to this House. I believe anybody who has listened to us objectively and conscientiously will know that the Minister has not made any attempt to hide anything. He's come out with the truth and nothing but the truth.
You're welcome back from the break. This is Duke's View. So this week I'll talk about the financial statements, the accountability statement that was delivered by the Minister for Finance to the members of Parliament. A lot of this is something that has been long coming. It's been one that parliamentarians have anticipated. They've looked forward to it. And it's the reason why critical business of the House, totaling almost $1 billion, has been put on ice, essentially frozen, because accountability of COVID funds has not been done. Well, he actually did it now. He presented a statement to the House. What do I make of it? I think what he did was expected. He wasn't coming here coming to Parliament to indicate that we spent 2 cedis to buy this and break that down. No, nobody expected him to do that. So he gave out the broad outlines, the broad outlay of how much the money was spent. And that's essentially what was done. So it's actually in good faith and in line with further transparency for Parliament to want to probe further, to get the details, to want to see the receipts, to want to reconcile the account and all of that. So that's a good job. And I thankfully I agree with the Speaker, and I thank him for the good judgment he exercised in this, because essentially there was no need, in my view, for another committee to have been created. Over the period, we've had these bipartisan committees. We just turned into another political talk shop. These bipartisan committees, from Cash for C to Sputnik V. As we speak, the recommendations of the Sputnik V committee, how many of them have been implemented? How many? Exactly how many of them have been implemented? How many of them have been implemented as we speak? Cash for seats. It turned into a minority and a majority report. Bipartisan committee in the national interest. They are supposed to make far-reaching recommendations. None of that happened. So it was going to be the same thing. Political football, kick it right, kick it left, NDC, NPP, and all of that. Meanwhile, there are structures within Parliament to have done that. Also, kudos to the Speaker for doing that and for referring this to a committee of the House to do that work, instead of creating another layer of bureaucracy, another bipartisan committee to do this work. The only thing may be that because of the level of public interest, the committee may have to open up its work to the public, just as we saw with the probe into the Sputnik V acquisition. That's also one. Another suggestion I will make also is that this is a matter that is of huge public interest. 19 billion was realized from several pools, multiple donor pools or multiple pools, from Stabilization Fund, from World Bank, from IMF, from the Bank of Ghana, from the country's reserves and all of that. 19 billion cedis. The minority contends that there's a shortfall because the 7 billion that was spent for budget support has not actually been accounted for, and we don't have the details, or people don't have the details of that. I would suggest that it's not the work of politicians to be auditors. That's why there's an auditor general. That's why there's the audit service. And of course, the oversight role and the supervisory role they play is good. So why can't the speaker, or why shouldn't the speaker write to the auditor general to say that we know that you would eventually audit these accounts, but because of the level of public interest in this COVID-19 expenditure, we want you to conduct a special audit into the use of these funds based on the broad outlay that has been given by the Minister for Finance. Go into it, do an audit of it, check the receipts line by line, who bought this, who bought that, what are the receipts, what did it account for, do a professional audit job as you've always been doing, and bring us the report. And based on this report, my Joint Committee on Finance and Health will use it as a basis, will serve as fodder for them to continue in the national interest. I think that's something that the Speaker should do, or even the committee should do. Write to the Auditor General within a time frame to do a special audit of the COVID funds. That gives you a certain professional and technical outlook. Because of course, at the end of the day, this is a committee of politicians. And even though the national interest may be the overriding factor, you can't rule out the politics from it. So let's have the Auditor General do a professional job, do a technical job, and present his report for the committee to further peruse. Because what the minister has presented, for all intents and purposes, is just a broad outlay. It may not be enough, as the minority has said, so there will be a further probe. But to get that done on a sound footing, in the national interest, with the technical expertise and all the professional expertise at our disposal, let the Auditor General do a special audit into this, present his report to the Joint Committee, and let it serve as the basis for the work that will be done. That's what I think. I think the Speaker should do that. Make a referral or write to the Auditor General, and also make a specific request to the committee to open its doors and make this probe by the bipartisan the Joint Committee live. Make it accessible to the public, because the COVID funds, it's our money.